ways that we can kind of counteract client scope creep. But what if it's coming from inside the house?
Ooh, yeah, that's the scariest of all the stories. It's coming from inside the house. Yeah, okay, I love it. Welcome to Effing Up. It's a Drupal podcast about those times in your life where a mistake, sometimes a little mistake, sometimes a big, huge one. We're not discriminating here. The only rule is that the mistake had to lead to something better. Was it a life lesson? Was it a whole new approach to your project? A better understanding with a client or vice versa, client to a project manager. I am joined by Specbee's wonderful director of marketing, Shefali Shetty. Hi, Shefali.
Hi, Jim.
And I guess I need to introduce myself, right? My name is Jim Barnthouse. I'm vice president of sales and marketing at Specbee. Shefali, how long have you been at Specbee?
Oh, right since
Forever?
the beginning? Yeah.
Yeah, since the beginning. Okay, so our first example of a effing up, our first version of this is coming from a very esteemed guest, Michael Weaver. Welcome.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Shefali. And yeah, I am an expert at effing up. I'm pretty good at this.
It says here you are a VP of operations at Specbee. Is that right?
That's right. Been here since 2018. Before that, I was a developer for going on 20 years. So been in the industry for a little bit.
Right. Yeah. And obviously you and I work together pretty often. We all work together pretty often. For this first run, we decided to try to do this internally. And we've all got good stories about failure, I think. But let's start off with the word failure. As I was kind of thinking through the idea of this podcast, I realized that failure kind of means something to different. It means different things to different people. So what does that F word mean to you, Michael?
It's a loaded question. You're waiting for the me to be offensive, but I'm not going to be. No, I mean, everyone experiences failure. We talk about it with our kids all the time. I mean, you can't experience success unless you experience failure. You won't know the difference, right? And it's really in perspective. So looking at something that doesn't go your way, oftentimes is just, an opportunity. That's the easy way to look at it. But it's really, everything is learning experience. Even when a project is a success, there's so many little failures along the way. There's so many things you could have done better. There's so many ways to improve. And especially in web development where we're doing large projects that involve, sometimes up to maybe 10 people on one team and 10 people on another, all working together. Someone's going to fail along the way. And, the real trick is recognizing it and getting past it. So failure to me is not really so much failure as it is just a stumbling block on the way.
Right. And, the funny thing is, when we kind of pitched this idea of a podcast to the rest of the Specbee world, they were like, wait a minute, what? You're going to do a podcast on failing? That's maybe not the best marketing technique. However, I think the hope of doing this podcast is that people can accept their failures. They can hear about other people's failures and learn from those. Like if we can save you from a failure because you hear one of our own or a guest's failure, does that save you from doing it yourself and then improving, which is what we feel happens when you do fail. I was thinking this morning about this, just a sports analogy, which is what a lot of people go to, especially here in the US. Practice, if you think about it, at any sport at its core, practice is just failing over and over again and learning from your mistakes and improving, right? And I think there's a weird, going back to the sports analogy, I think there's a weird anomaly because we say people like Tom Brady are champions because they refuse to fail, right? or that they don't accept it. But I wonder from their perspective if that's really what they feel. I would suspect it's more how we define failure, because it's not like Tom Brady just had those skills gifted to him and born to him. He wasn't like coming out of the womb throwing footballs 40 yards. He worked at it, and inherently there is failure within there, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think everybody
So, yeah.
talks so much about success and, how they got to be successful. And there's so much banter about that, but nobody really talks about failures. And like you said, Jim, that was one of our main goals, was to get people talk about their failures. So it's not a taboo, having a failure is not that bad as you might think, because once you had a failure, you always learn from it. So that's what I believe.
Right. I agree. I 100% agree. And in fact, I mean, I'm sure we'll get into this. I think if Shefali, if you were to ask me, do you have a question? You have a question, right? Because there's one you brought up earlier, and I was like, don't ask me before we start this thing. But there, what do I have any like failures? Do I have a failure that I think of when I think about this? And the funny part is, I don't think about those failures. Like, I can't come up with one, because not that I don't fail. I think I fail all the time, but I just don't
look at them.
I think I automatically have that sense that a failure is when you say failure, it's a bad thing. It's a negative, but I don't look at them that way in real life. But, I'm trying to figure out how to explain this. When somebody goes, "Oh, you failed at that," maybe I did, but not to me. Immediately I'm going, "Oh no, this is just an opportunity for me to learn how to not," just like what we've been saying. But because of that mindset, and I've really only got that mindset in maybe the last 10 years of my life, because of that mindset, I barely recognize when I do fail. I think I can go, something went wrong there. And what did it? And then I immediately start digging into it and going, okay, I know what happened there. Let me think of a process so that doesn't happen the next time. It's kind of like a research and development process, right? That's what they're doing too. They're trying things and then seeing if something worked. If it did, all right, let's note that and let's improve on it. Or if it failed, let's improve on that. So I don't have a specific one, but I'm curious if you do, Shefali, before we get into Michael.
I do. I have, but then, yeah, I mean, right now I have that, solution sort of a mindset that, if something fails, I know that there's a solution for that. So it's not a big deal. But then there have been a few ventures of mine where I have seen failures, and that at that moment, that made me feel bad. But now when I look back at it, I feel I'm actually here because of all of those failures. There was, like, for example, I had started this a website called judgebetter.com, and it was a site where you you can compare hosting providers. You can see their features, their prices. I could not put in too much time there, and it seemed like it was not working out after some time. So I stopped doing that. But then I did learn so much about social media, about marketing, because I felt that was like my own baby, right? So I was going all out and marketing it. And that's where I really learned a few good marketing ideas and things that I also implement now. So I think
pick up your skills. Yeah, it's practice, right?
Yeah,
that's interesting, because I think probably how, and I'm curious to find this out if it's real. I wonder if it's how you feel about the failure at the moment. If it makes it. Is it your view of the mistake that makes it what generally the world considers a failure, or is it, if you look at it in a positive way, that's the growth? If someone looks at it and they're like, "Oh, look, you just grew," rather than "you just messed up." I think it's probably how you react to it in the moment. I don't know. Did we just figure this whole thing out and just can end the podcast now?
Podcast over.
No.
End.
Let's dig into so Michael, we asked you to come with a failure. Just the concept of the podcast is, hey, tell us a moment where you messed up and how that improved you in some way. And I'm curious to how this will go. Do you have a pretty good one, you think?
Yeah, I mean, I actually have like really an organizational one. It's me plus Specbee. So
Great.
it's not. I don't think it's embarrassing. As a matter of fact, I think it shows a lot of positive aspects for us. But it's more. It's almost a fear of failure story more than it is a failure story. Because
interesting.
In a way, it was.
I think that is a play too. Yeah.
Yeah, and that you think about that a lot. There's a lot of fear of success and fear of failure that goes along, and part of it is defining success. So I mean, you can't know what success is without failure. You can't know what failure is without success. So this particular episode of our professional lives was actually a really important client for us and still is. We've been working with them since 2018. And I've been working with some people there since like 2001. So off and on. So it's an old contact of mine. But the company's called Great Southern Homes. Home builder in South Carolina and Georgia. We've been with them since Specbee's been with them since they were a tenth of the size. So they were at 40 million revenue, I believe, when we started working with them. Now they're 600 million. So they're much, much larger. A lot of different challenges. But when we first started working with them, we were rock stars, right? That we were saviors. We came in and they had so many problems with their website, and we saved them from these major issues like buggy software, malware-ridden site, things like that. So when we first started working with them, they were at wit's end. They were going to have to restart and rebuild, and at the time, housing wasn't doing so great, so they were kind of desperate. But
so were they on Drupal, Michael, before they?
Yeah, they were. This isn't even the failure part. This is us being a success. They were actually on Drupal 7, but I don't know if you remember, Shefali, but they had another version of Drupal 7 embedded inside Drupal 7. And inside that one, there was another version installed inside of that one. It was the most bizarre technical circumstance we had come across. They were so far behind, and there's malware everywhere. It was terrible. So we rescued them from that, but that wasn't even the bad part. So we got to a point where they started asking us, well, what can we do with the site? And so we had to have a lot of heart to hearts with them, and we said, well, really what you need is a full redesign. You're going to be best served if we really tackle this holistically. And this is a big step for them because they had been burned by their previous developers. And they really didn't have the appetite for it, So we had this, long drawn out conversations with them, and finally they decided, hey, let's go for it. And so we went for it, and it started so well. It really did. We went through like proper UX practices and proper identifying users and user types and talking about the journey. It was a case study. It was a case study in the making, and we had all the beautiful hand drawn versions of their pages and how things would work, and that's almost where our failure started. Like we, not that we bit off more than we could chew. We did too much. Too much.
We took too much.
Too much, like big. What do you mean by too much? Like, give me more on that. Like,
for perspective, right? For perspective, Specbee really started pushing into the US in 2018. So this is our first big US client. And we'd already, done, a lot to help their bottom line. So we were looking at this. This is a big opportunity for us. So this is a big client, and bigger than anything we've done with them before. Like I would say probably 10 or 15 times as big. So they had pressure on us. We had pressure on ourselves. But what happened was, and I don't know if anybody, I'd never experienced this before in my life, but we scope creeped ourselves. Scope creep is when the client usually comes and says, hey, you're making that widget, you're making that module, you're making that little button. Well, why don't we move that a little bit to the right? What if we make it bigger? And what if we, instead of a button, we do a whole CTA? And what if there's a video that goes with it, right? Very, very quickly, a small project gets larger and larger. But we did it to ourselves. There's so many ways that we can kind of counteract client scope creep. But what if it's coming from inside the house?
Ooh, yeah, that's the scariest of all the stories. It's coming from inside the house. Yeah. Okay. I love it.
And so, and what happened was, we had a big team working on it. And it came up that we were like, I believe it was like maybe 2 months before launch. And, we were not hitting our milestones. And the milestones were changing because we were the ones changing them. And it wasn't the client's fault at all. It was us. And so we were adding on features. We were saying, hey, wouldn't it be great if we did this? And don't they really need this? What if everyone got notified when a new customer signed up? And we were going far beyond.
We were going all out.
You were trying to show off.
Yeah, and I'm definitely not saying we were perfect. Like, oh, we were so good that we were adding on features. No, it was that we were adding on features and we couldn't get them done because we hadn't planned on them. So, there's that saying, when you find yourself in a hole, stop digging. And that's where we got ourselves to. We were about, I think, 2 months out, and we said, there's 4 to 6 months left on this. And that's a hard conversation to have with yourselves, but it's even harder with the client. And
was that the moment? Was that the moment when you realized you had the mistake? There was it was
the client saying, hey, are we still on track to launch this in June? And we had to look at it honestly and say, oh gosh, no. So we had to do a lot of I guess honest introspection. I guess that's a good term for it, right? We had to really look at it and say, what's going on? How can we get to the end? And how did this happen? And how that happened was I guess the most eye-opening part, because none of us saw it, going on, except for I think we had a project manager who was pulling his hair out, right? But overall, like, everyone else was so enthusiastic about it that we dug ourselves in a hole and couldn't get out. So we were trying to do too much, and we hadn't even looked at it from a standpoint of we need more money, and it would be irresponsible for us to say to the client, hey, we added on too many things here. It's going to cost you twice as much. You just can't do that. So we did have an honest conversation with them, though. That was a hard part, because they had marketing behind it. They had plans behind launching in June. So we had to admit to our mistakes, and that's always a hard conversation to have. Right. Yeah.
Well, when you had that conversation, was there how did they accept it? Were they like, oh yeah, well, I guess we're getting all this bonus stuff, or were they involved in the bonus stuff and started picking? They just probably had no idea that that was going to extend the delivery, right?
Yeah.
Right. I think some of the people we were working with had some clue, but they were like, "Well, push through it." And it was one of those where you just can't push through it. It's too big.
Right.
And then higher up, as higher you go in the organization, the less insight they have. So they just look at it and say, "Hey, you're going to be how late?"
Right.
What are you talking about, right?
I gotta say, this story is making me feel stressed right now because I know that the experience of having to push off a delivery date, but pushing it off like by 3 or 4 months, that's a real push. So what was the how did you come about making this a positive for them? Was it a positive for them in the end? Was it positive?
Yeah, it actually was. So, really the hard part is having that honest conversation with the client, right? You want to be able to say, here's where we are. We're sorry for this problem. Here's how we're going to solve it. And I think that's a problem, like professionally and personally, a lot of people have is just saying sorry. Not even like, our sincerest apologies, that's really formal, but just saying, hey, I'm sorry. This happened, and here's how we're going to fix it. We recognize our mistakes. This is how we're going to move forward. There's a lot.
Right.
I mean, the same goes for your spouse, your kid, the person you bump into at the grocery store. Right, saying you're sorry means an awful lot to people.
And meaning it.
And also, it's also not saying I'm sorry, but. Or I'm sorry you feel that way, right? It's really taking it on yourself, and to have that feeling and to be honest about it, you have to have that introspection. You have to say what did we do wrong, and not everything is a positive. You can't say, well, we tried too hard, and that's why I'm sorry. No, it's I'm sorry. We're not going to meet our deliverable. This is a big deal for us, not meeting your needs. So, for this client, Great Southern Homes, we had that conversation. It was painful. All those conversations are painful. But us having a plan that really, really helped. So we were able to plan out like, well, here's how we recover. Here's what was not originally included in this project. And we're not going to do that now, but we're going to wait and do that at the end. After we launch this site, after we launch this project, and we're all happy, then we're going to have these add-ons, and everyone's going to be happy with those.
I think that's the key,
Right.
because when you not only do you say you're sorry, but if you recognize you've made a mistake and you need to have that conversation with somebody, it's, hey, I'm sorry. Here's how we're going to be constructive about it, and come at it with a how we're going to either fix the problem or address it so that it becomes a positive thing for all of us, right? And sometimes we do have to sometimes the constructive process is, hey, we're gonna take one here, right? Because we've created this issue and now we need to correct it, and that's going to require us doing something, working harder on something, and hiring somebody, whatever that thing might be. But because we're coming at with the hey, we made this mistake, but here's how we're going to try to make amends for it. That's a big shift from just saying I'm sorry, right? Sorry, we don't know what to do with it. Yeah. So that makes total sense. But so in the end, how did the client feel about how you approached it?
Well, that's the kind of amazing part is, they really, really bought into it. So, we kind of entered, like, sometimes you're working with a marketing director, you're working with, the website manager or the product owner, and their boss and their boss's boss and their boss's boss don't know. All they know is the deliverables aren't there. This is not working for us. We spent this money.
Yeah.
And so, we're in there with the boss's boss in the meeting, and they were ready to go. They were just like ready to, have a raised voice meeting. Let's just say that, right? They were, coming in saying, do we need to bring someone else in for this project?
Right. Wow.
And by the end, I mean, they didn't say that, but by the end they did say, hey, this is how we came in, but we like this approach. So we had a new plan. It was both a plan to finish and how we were going to staff it. We talked about how we were going to do, change our regular check-ins to have more transparency in the process. We use, an agile methodology. They didn't even understand that at the boss's boss level, right? So we explained, like, here's what you're going to see, and with that method, we might fail in this 2 weeks, but that failure is going to be brought over to the next sprint. And then that next sprint, that's when we're going to, make sure that we solve that for that problem. So even them understanding, our methodology and how we work together was really, really positive. It also helped, we brought in, it wasn't just, me and the project manager. It was me and the CEO. So it was a mea culpa from the very top to the bottom, right? So it was full transparency on our side. And they really appreciated that. And since then, that was 2018. They're still a client. We're still doing big projects with them. They're mostly happy with us. We have failures along the way. Every project, there's always going to be a stumbling block. Not everything in life is a paved sidewalk. Sometimes there's really more of a cross-country trail, right? There's roots and rocks and things you trip over, and you just keep moving.
Yeah. So the lesson for it, right? So, okay. So that one turned out well.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. In the end, we delivered something that was better than expected, and everyone's on the same page. And it sounds like we course corrected midstream, which is great, which is what happens almost in any project I've ever worked on in my life. But how did that change the way we did things going forward? So we didn't have that same issue come up of that. It sounds like, I know that doesn't happen now for us, right? Because I'm involved in all this now. But so what changed at the time?
A lot of it is managing expectations internally. So especially with this client, what we've done is a lot of our work there has been generated by us. So we have ideas and we present ideas for them, because that's going to happen if you're looking at a project from creatively from a holistic standpoint. Like, you're looking at the entire thing, you're going to see things along the way, no matter how much work you do up front, that you can improve just a little bit more. So really, it's sticking to the current project, but also bringing up those opportunities as you go and saying, hey, after this is complete, let's get this big win together. And after this is complete, we were thinking about talking to you about this other option. And that's
identifying those really within it's like that, because just get a little bit into how the sausage is made. You've got your user stories, you've got and those are determining how things are done, and your UX and your design and how things should function. But there's, like, you're right, there's always something that comes up as you're designing or as you're implementing something. You go, oh, wait a minute. So how should this work? I see it happen all the time in every single project. And there's always this is an easy way for us to do it, but here's an even better way we can potentially do it down the road. Do we build that into the scope now? Do we do a scope addendum, or do we save this for a future project? And that's the conversation to have, right? Because it's easy for us to go. It's easy for us to say, well, maybe it's not easy for us to say, but I feel like it's easy for us to go, well, let's just throw that in there. And maybe there is some of that in every project, right? Where you go, oh, but this can be better for them. Let's approach them with it, and we'll just kind of include it in the scope. But then, sometimes that leads down a slippery path too. So there is a choice made by maybe the account manager, or the project manager, that says, where do we start going? And this is too far out of scope from what our original plan was. How do we approach this going forward?
Right. And honestly, this is a very, we value the client, especially because this is one of those clients where we're able to kind of lead and be a partner in their design process or their online, all their online engagement. So we come to them with ideas that we see somewhere else or ideas that we have ourselves. And sometimes they go, well, you don't need that. But other times they're like, yeah, that's a really good idea. How do we get that done? And so often in this industry and other industries, you wait for the client to come to you and say, I need this done, X, Y, and Z. And then they have maybe additional tasks. But this one, it's like, because we had this conversation and this problem, we're now at the point where it's not that we're driving the relationship, but it's really a partnership more than any other. So
those are the kind of clients you want, right? I mean, that's the best relationships. That's where your best output comes from. Right.
And we do some really, really cool work with them. And sometimes it's really impactful too. They're like, we didn't even think of that. The best part is, none of our competition's doing this, and this is working really well for us. It makes you feel good.
That does.
And along the way,
it makes me, I'm not even involved in that, and that makes me feel good. So I'm.
And they did win a few awards, I believe.
Oh yeah. I think they've won the same. They're like 6 years running, I think, in one award. So
wow.
Yeah, we get to pat ourselves on the back a little bit too. That's always good.
Thank goodness you made that terrible mistake of giving them more than what originally was planned. Yeah, I mean, so that's the funny thing. I wonder if they look at that as a mistake or as us messing up still, if they would. Or would they go, no, that was a great benefit in the long run for us. Again, that's the whole theme of this podcast here is those mistakes that how do you turn those positive? Hopefully there's somebody out there listening to this that says, wow, that's happening to me right now. We keep on giving stuff to impress this client or to make us look good and to do this type of work that we've never done before. We want to do it. Maybe that sets them on the correct path, Michael. What if you just saved somebody from having that one of those yelling?
Yeah. I hope it does save someone for some, because other people obviously will have this problem. I mean, you always have we screwed up this one, so we're going to give them this one. We have this other idea we're going to do for free. That happens to everyone. So I hope that someone else does have some of these same experiences, and that they maybe gain some insights from what we went through.
Thanks. So the three lessons here that I've learned from the way you all turned around the disaster into a win is, I think, honesty. You all had a disaster recovery plan and transparency, right? So you all were
transparency, yeah.
Transparent and saying sorry. Always saying sorry, and when you mean it. If you don't mean it, you're a psychopath, right? So at some point you have to say, "Wow, I made a mistake, and I'm very sorry." There's nothing wrong with that. It's not a weakness. It's not a negative at all. It's a positive. It's recognizing where you are and where you made a mistake.
It's being human, right? I mean, that's in the end everybody who's working on this, unless there's some new Chat GPT project. I know they're starting to code now. The AI is starting to code. We are human, and we're going to make mistakes, and it's as long as you approach it the proper way. In the end, you turn into a positive. That's the goal. Thank you, Michael, for jumping on this first test run. I don't know how this will turn out once we watch it or hear it and it gets edited and we add some music. I imagine there's some music playing over me right now. I don't know.
Let's end it on I'm the first failure.
You're the first failure. All right. We're all the first failure. Yeah. I appreciate your time, Michael. And thank you so
Thank
much.
you, Michael.
Hopefully we have another one of these again in the future.
Yeah.
We can talk about another failure. You certainly have more failures than just one, Michael, right? I mean, I don't know.
Oh, I have 12 this week.
There we go. Well, great. We'll catch you next time. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Shefali, thank you for putting this all together. We'll wrap this up and then we'll start planning the next one. Oh, we'd love to have guests. Yeah, we are definitely going to be looking for guests. Initially, of course, we're just inviting people who don't know about it. And they're like, what am I going to talk about? Yeah, you're going to talk about the mistake you made. But yeah, if you'd like to be a guest and hear this and you are interested and you've got a good story, we want to talk to you. So shoot us an email. What'd you say it was? Podcast@specbee.com?
Yeah.
Podcast@specbee. Good. I see we're already ahead of the game. I love it. Thank you so much, everyone. Talk to you next time.
All right. Thanks.
Bye.